I'm George Galloway, and I present Kalima Horra on Almayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. Kalima Horra means free word. That's what I speak. So Kalima Horra is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Almayadeen television. Welcome to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Almayadeen television, coming to you from London, but discussing the Middle East, in particular, Donald Trump's deal of the century. Has it been a failure, is our question. Well, my take on British, European, other political circles is that it's being treated like an embarrassing eruption by an elderly relative in the corner of the room, which everyone is pretending never happened. The problem is, though, it's deadly serious in Washington and in Jerusalem, in occupied Jerusalem. The Trump administration may or may not survive the November general elections in the United States. But if they do, then Trump surely intends to push ahead with it. Mr. Netanyahu would already have begun implementing the parts of the deal which are so advantageous to the Israeli Zionist cause. It's deadly serious too, because each of these plans, however much they are regarded as non-starters everywhere else, provides a baseline for the next plan. The Oslo Agreement, which required enormous sacrifices by the Palestinian people, the widespread giving away of land, and the widespread denial of the Palestinians in the diaspora of their legitimate, inalienable legal right to return to their homeland. And this new plan makes the Oslo Agreement look like a paradise by comparison. This new plan doesn't just annex the Jordan Valley, doesn't just make clear that the Palestinian capital of a state that will never really be a state, be a collection of Bantustans on the South African model, will definitely not have a capital in Jerusalem. In the eastern districts of Jerusalem is the weasel phrase that has been introduced. It effectively ends the long struggle of the Palestinian people for statehood and for the right of return. Many people are embarrassed too by its corrupt provenance. It's the work of the son-in-law of the President of the United States, a man with close family and personal relations with the Israeli leaders. Benjamin Netanyahu frequently slept in the spare room in his house. That's how close they are. And Jared Kushner had never previously displayed any idea of statesmanship or interest and knowledge in foreign affairs. He boasts that he's read 25 books, imagine, about the Middle East as preparation for drawing up this plan. The corrupt provenance, the coming from a nepotistic, corrupt nest of Israel supporters in the White House and in the family surroundings, is just one of its problems. It has been rejected by all the Arab countries, even though 3 Arab countries sent their ambassadors to the White House for the unveiling of the program. But no Arab country has recognized, has accepted the Kushner peace plan as it is absurdly described. No Muslim country has. The Organization of Islamic Countries has comprehensively rejected it, as the Arab League did. No Palestinian, no matter how moderate, could possibly endorse this plan, and none has. Short of reinventing the village leagues, the former Israel plan to undermine the PLO, it's hard to see how any stooge can come forward on the Palestinian side to agree to negotiate this plan. And it doesn't have, as I said, much in the way of support in Europe, though Boris Johnson's British government gave it an early, cautious welcome as a step forward. So, what's going to happen now in the Palestinian arena, in the Arab arena, in the Muslim arena? What's going to happen in international politics? Are we witnessing the end of a struggle which many of us have been in for most of our lives, and some of us have been in all of our lives because we were victims of the creation of the Zionist state of Israel in the first place? As always, we have an audience of distinguished experts, one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me. One of those who was there at the beginning and who lost everything in the Nakba is the first speaker this evening. Dr. Ghada Karmi joins us, and I'm most grateful that you are here, Doctor. How does the Trump Middle East peace plan look to you?
Well, I think you've summed it up very well. All the major problems with this peace plan. I would add just that among the really bad news is that Jared Kushner, when he was drawing up the plan, said that he wasn't interested in history. So if there's anything that's really relevant to this situation, it's, of course, history. And the second thing is that the plan will affect the Palestinian people more than anyone else. And none of them was represented when it was drawn up. So that really gives an indication of the quality of this so-called deal of the century. Yes, indeed, as a child, I'm the victim of the creation of the State of Israel, and I've been in exile ever since. To me, one of the most serious aspects of this proposal is the demolition of the right of return, which affects all of us in exile more than anyone else, obviously. But you know, what really worries me about this, on the face of it, this deal is a joke. I mean, I've read it. I've actually taken the trouble to read it. And I just remember thinking, at first sight, it looked like a joke. Nobody could take this seriously, I thought. But the problem with these American Zionist plans is that however laughable they are, they have an effect. Not only do they, as you so rightly pointed out, do they create a new baseline for further discussions on so-called peace, but, and this I really want to bring this in, the role of this so-called international community. You know, whatever outrage Trump has been responsible for with regard to the Palestinians has been passed. It's been passed. People show outrage, they make a fuss, they make a noise. Doesn't mean a thing. In the end, the thing happens. You know, recently we saw that the US recognized Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel. Immediately, the Arab League, the European Union, you name it, rejected this idea. What's happened? Nothing. Now, it's as if it really is the capital of the State of Israel. The same thing has happened with the Golan Heights. What's happened? Nothing. And many, many more examples. So the thing I really want to look at, or want to point out, is the fact that there is no force stopping Israel, stopping the United States. And unless we really confront this reality, it seems to me we'll still be sitting here next year with your excellent company talking about the latest horror outrage that these two allies have committed. I would suggest that we need to ask the question, what is wrong? Why are international actors standing by and allowing this to happen? We're not talking about vociferous protests, of course, but in the end, you have to act, and nobody is acting. What's this paralysis all about?
Well, as you very well know, the issue has become so toxified, so electric, that politicians dare not pick it up. In the past, when I started in this issue in the mid-1970s, there was not a majority, but there were a considerable number of politicians who stood on the Arab or on the Palestinian side of the argument. Now there are none. You could say that the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, was effectively tortured to death as a result of his decades of support for the Palestinian people. And now you have his putative successors outdoing each other in their obeisance to the Israeli point of view. Some of them still say, well, you know, we support the rights of the Palestinians and so on, but the slavishness of their support for Israeli action and the concept of Israel negates any crocodile tears that they may shed, if they do, for the Palestinians. And this must be being mirrored across the European Union, for example. It cannot be that only in Britain is it now effectively political suicide to stand with the Palestinian side of this argument. I often joke, if I had stood with Israel rather than Palestine, I'd probably be an ex-prime minister by now. And some of Israel's supporters kindly pointed that out to me. In the United States, perhaps Bernie Sanders might take a different approach. He might, if he's elected, there's two big ifs there, of course. If he is the nominee and if he is elected, he might take a different point of view to Kushner and to Trump. So in a way, the question is, how were we strong once and now utterly disarmed and terrified of the Israeli side? That's a big question. Perhaps Mr. Othman, as a distinguished journalist, you could contribute on that point, because Dr. Karmi asks, why is no one doing anything? And my view is that it's suicide to do anything. I could show you my scars.
Absolutely. I think the Jewish lobby in this country and in the United States and many European countries have always used the weapon of anti-Semitism. Anybody who supports the Palestinian cause or dare to criticize Israel would be immediately stamped and stigmatized as an anti-Semite. And this has created fear in this country. We could, as you mentioned, Jeremy Corbyn, day to day, you know, if you open the Times, especially the Times, every single day they must have an item about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and accusing Jeremy Corbyn of having met this Palestinian leader and that Palestinian leader. So this is a mighty weapon, and it gives a distorted picture. I mean, the Palestinians and the Arabs in general are Semites. But in this day and age, as Dr. Ghada mentioned, international law is being trampled on. There are UN resolutions in support of Palestinian rights, the right of return, that East Jerusalem at least must be the capital of the future Palestinian state, that occupying lands of other people by force is inadmissible. But all these things, Netanyahu and President Trump have trampled all over the international law. And that tells us that nowadays might is right, or so it seems, because the international community is sitting silent, not doing anything to achieve, to apply the international resolutions in favor of a Palestinian state. At one time, just before Trump came to power, the whole international community took the two-state solution as something that should materialize and should happen. But nowadays, the Israeli policy is one of live and let die. The Palestinians, not long ago when they signed for Oslo, were telling the Israelis, we will coexist, we will live together, and we will accept only 22% of our land, which was a huge sacrifice, in fact. Nowadays, Israel wants the whole of Palestine, lock, stock, and barrel. In 1948, when they launched their war, they inherited our cities, which we built. They inherited our farms, our little factories. They left us nothing, and they drove us out. And I believe what will happen now is Israel is being given a license to continue the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians.
Well, even now, inside the Green Line, places I myself used to visit and enjoy, the so-called triangle, one of the little noticed parts of the Trump deal of the century is to expel those areas from Israel, getting rid of 325,000 Palestinians with Israeli citizenship at the stroke of a pen. Now, how's that for ethnic cleansing? I've searched in history and can find no other example of such a thing. People are driven out, of course, but seldom legally driven out, kicked out of the state that they're already in.
I would like to mention here, on the point of ethnic cleansing, the book by the Israeli historian Ilan Pappé. It explains the origins and the plans, scientific, if you like, plans, how they chose the villages that they will blow up. 400 and something villages, Palestinian villages, were obliterated, leveled to the ground. And they went about that, doing aerial surveys. Where are these villages and what villages we will demolish? So it was done deliberately, scientifically, if you like, very well planned. Even when the Oslo Agreement was reached between the Palestinians and the Israelis, they divided the West Bank into areas of A, B, and C. The A, which would have come under Palestinian immediate control, were the hugely populated areas. And the B had less population. And the C had the smallest possible population, in which the Israelis intended all along to build settlements upon. So that was another form of pursuing ethnic cleansing and grabbing land to forbid Palestinians to expand into that space.
Yousef Al-Helou, another distinguished journalist, this time from Gaza, where we first met. How do you think Palestinian public opinion is now? Of course, it rejects the Trump plan, but what is the opinion about what should be done?
Well, if you ask any Palestinian, they will tell you that Palestine is not for sale. Our inalienable rights are not for sale. What was offered was not a peace plan. It was a dictatorial plan to finish off the Palestinian cause. The American administration, they will tell you, is not and has never been an honest peace broker. It seems the Palestinians are squeezed into the corner to give up the remaining of their rights. Palestinians feel that they are abandoned, let down by the so-called international community and by some Arab countries from the Gulf region. It's actually a way to pressure Palestinians to surrender. Israel has been working day and night, buying time. Palestinians feel they are neglected. So the West, or let's say the major Western powers, think that Palestinians have to believe that they have to accept that they are the victims of the so-called, of the bad events that took place in Europe at the hands of Nazi Germany. So it seems that we are the victims and we are the scapegoat of the insults that took place in the 1940s. So the Palestinians in general rejected the so-called peace plan because it does not meet the minimum demands of the Palestinian people to have an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem to be established on lands occupied in 1967. So they don't believe in the role of the mediation of the American administration. They believe that we live in the law of the jungle. There is no justice anymore. So they are let down. This is how they feel. They are hopeless.
Hopeless is never a great place to be, of course. Is there anyone with a plan in Palestine? You could say, I'm sorry to say it, but a Palestinian leadership that has presided over a chain of events that has ended like this, is probably time for them to retire. They said they were going to break security cooperation with Israel, but they did not break it.
Many pledges were made to stop the security coordination, to probably halt the implementation of the so-called Oslo Accords, but this did not materialize. So Palestinians view these talks are a mirage. It will never happen because some people are benefiting from this authority. So we don't know if there is genuine Palestinian stance on part of the Palestinian leadership to go to the ICC or to really use this card, which the halt of the security coordination. The Israeli side, they know that the Palestinian leadership is weak. They can do whatever they want. The settlements in the West Bank are considered no longer illegal. Palestinian lands are being confiscated day and night. Thousands of Palestinians are languishing behind Israeli bars. Our resources are being stolen. Our natural gas in the Mediterranean is being stolen. So the Palestinian leadership has to take more steps on the ground to really show to their own people that they care about the Palestinian rights. So in light of the kind of division between Fatah and Hamas, Palestinian people have been living in a limbo. So unity is the first step towards really being united and face all external challenges and to step up for our rights.
Once upon a time, there would have been an uprising as a response to this. There were, of course, protests and demonstrations, but you couldn't call it an intifada, could you?
No, it wasn't. It was kind of expressing anger, frustration, because if you're gonna do intifada against your own people, the Arab Spring did not play well. Palestinians were hopeful that the Arab Spring would bring a change to the region. Of course, the Arab people in the Arab world, they appreciate the support of they have respect for the Palestinian people for their struggle, but it's their leaders who are preventing them from expressing their rights. So
let's explore that.
There's despair and frustration.
The Bahrainis have just arrested a man this day for burning an Israeli flag, imagine, in an Arab country. There's much more of this after the break. You're watching Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Almayadeen television, coming from London, but discussing Palestine, Israel, the Middle East, and Donald Trump's peace plan. We took the Kalima Horra camera onto the streets of London to see what the people thought. Let's take a look.
What is Donald Trump achieving with his so-called deal of the century when he knew that almost all countries would end up rejecting it?
I think Trump wants to sort of just draw a line over the whole Palestine case, and essentially I think he wants to completely rule out the possibility of a separate Palestine state.
Well, he wants to give Israel everything it wants.
He wants to facilitate the expansion of Israel into Palestine and prevent any proper two-state solution.
I don't really know what Trump's trying to achieve with his deal plan. I don't think it takes into account the Palestinians, and I don't think he has any position to be making deals for Palestinians when he doesn't. It's not a deal for the Palestinians, and it's just not fair.
I'm not sure whether he knew that all countries would reject that in the first place. I think that he was hoping that some of them wouldn't. But also I have a feeling, but that's kind of my conspiracy theory, that it's all about elections that are coming up both in Israel and USA. So it possibly has something to do with the actual plan peace plan. However, I have a feeling that he's trying to win lots of electorate in future elections.
I don't even think he wants to achieve peace, to be honest. I think he just wants to achieve victory for Israel and not really anything for Palestine.
Would the Palestinian cause get better international recognition by refusing Trump's deal of the century or accepting it?
I'm not sure whether it's linked at all. Palestinians get so much support internationally and recognition anyway that I'm not sure whether it's linked. They should turn it down, of course, but I don't know what the response would be. Probably would be unifying.
I believe so, because unless they refuse it, then everyone's going to think they're happy with it. And they shouldn't be happy with it because it's a rotten deal, and it makes me angry. Yeah.
I think so, because I think there are enough people around the world that are against the deal of the century, and I think there's a lot of people that are with the Palestinian cause, and I think a lot of people around the world see the deal of the century as a sort of road to apartheid.
But they don't get they don't get support internationally now either. Before there was the deal, there was never support for Palestinians. So after the deal, there probably wouldn't be any support. It would probably remain the same if they said no.
Most certainly, yeah. They've got nothing to gain from accepting the plan.
I'm not sure about that one. Possibly. They'll gain more awareness. I don't know if awareness will lead to support, but there will be more awareness.
Well, quite a high level of recognition there on the streets of the land of Balfour as to what this is all about. Makes you wonder how the Israel lobby in British politics is so powerful if that's the voice of the people on the street. Sir, you have the microphone. What would you like to say?
Hi, I'm Timo Al-Farooq. I'm from Berlin, Germany. I'm a freelance journalist. Being from Germany, it is amazing that we as Germans are not allowed to say anything about Israel. This is like we go through school learning that Germany did a bad thing, and everybody has to adhere to this narrative, which is, of course, right. The killing of 6 million Jews was a German crime against humanity. It was a genocide. But this guilt Germans have does not allow them to see any further, to make the connection that what is happening in Palestine today has nothing to do with the Holocaust. It has nothing to do with it. And if you have somebody like Judith Butler, who was in Berlin, she was supposed to speak at an event, at a pro-Palestinian event. The event got canceled with no reasons. They said it was logistical reasons. And one German politician, she's actually from the left, I think she's from the Green Party, she actually called Judith Butler an anti-Semite. And the people who actually invited her, that they did a wrong thing to actually invite an anti-Semite to speak. And there we have the problem that we have no force, as you said, Dr. Karmi. There's no force to actually stand up for the Palestinians. There's no force to stand up for them because if you do, as you said, you're an anti-Semite. So I think the problem is, how do we get people to actually learn that one thing does not actually mean the other?
Very interesting. Let's take the young gentleman in the middle.
Hello, my name is Ramy Azizeh. I'm a Palestinian myself. I come from Bethlehem. I believe in this last phase, in the last days, the Palestinians themselves have suffered, and they are the ones who've paid the price. I believe that we need stability in our part of the region. We need a movement to the future. And in my point of view, this could happen in 3 simple steps. First is for Arabs to unite together. And for that to happen, they need to stop blaming other countries for not being able to unite themselves. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, it is in their hands to unite or not to. Not in the hands of Iran, Saudi Arabia, America, even not in the hands of the United Nations, who have taken 192 decisions in favor of the Palestinians, yet not one decision has been accomplished on the ground. And then the second step is for Fatah and Hamas to unite together and stop blaming each other. If they unite together, they'll unite the people, and it will be in our favor as Palestinians. And thirdly, as Dr. Ghada said, Donald Trump has done the major part of the deal of the century by declaring Jerusalem as Israel's capital, then declaring Golan Heights, and thirdly, he cut millions of dollars of aids for the Palestinians. And then we were talking about cutting security coordination. But could that happen? Would that mean an end to Oslo? Would that mean an end to the Palestinian Authority, which they don't want to happen? And at the end, I would like to ask...
Well, why not? What good is the Palestinian Authority doing?
Well, I don't know what good they're doing, but I'm speaking, why don't they want to cut their aids, their relations?
Because they don't want to demit their office. They don't want to be the ex-president of Palestine and the ex-prime minister and so on.
Yeah.
But these are not meaningful titles. There is no Palestinian National Authority. It's not an authority. It isn't national. It's Palestinian, but it's not serving the Palestinians. That's my view on it as someone who was with Arafat for decades and supported the Oslo Agreement. More fool me.
Well, I believe, just like you, 25 years of negotiations has led to nothing. We've completely failed. We've not been able to put an end to this conflict, even on the 1967 borders. And yes, it is unfortunate that we failed.
Well, you've spoken brilliantly, let me say. But you call these simple steps, but they're very far from simple.
It is.
Just like the Ba'ath Party couldn't unite Iraq and Syria, it seems the Palestinian ranks cannot unite Fatah and Hamas. When I started in this, there was no Hamas. They hadn't been invented yet. And the Palestinians had one address, one leader and one address. That was what Arafat always said. If you want to speak to the Palestinians, you'll have to speak to me, because the PLO speaks for all of our people, inside and out. We have one address, Tunis, or wherever he happened to have been driven at that point in time. But I want to challenge you on the first of your simple steps. Long before you were born, when I got involved in this, we were very weak in Western countries and absolutely hegemonic in Arab countries. Every Arab was bristling with fervor in support of the Palestinian people, and we could have fitted all the supporters of the PLO in 1975 into this hole. Now you can't fit us into Hyde Park, but the Arab factor seems to me to have completely disappeared. I know Yousef said earlier, it's their governments, but is it really only their governments? The Arabs are slaughtering each other in various parts of the world for somebody else's flags, for Islamist fervor. They are far more ready to fight each other than they are to fight Israel. Isn't that a major part of this problem?
Well, it is, I think, in my point of view. And to Donald Trump, I say, and on behalf of myself and the people that I consider to represent from Palestine, please take our opinion. This is not a peace plan. This is a war plan. This needs to stop. It needs to come to an end. Thank you.
Very beautifully spoken. A young gentleman here at the front row.
Yeah, is it possible it could placate Israel, or do you think they're not? Or do you think it's not? They're still going to continue to not simply occupy but expand their territory?
Well, effectively, it means that all of their illegal settlements will be legalized. They will become part of the State of Israel. The Jordan Valley, which is about 30% of the area of the West Bank, will be annexed to Israel. And the contiguity of the West Bank and Gaza will be a tunnel.
Well, it's not really contiguity then.
Well, it's a very strange definition of contiguity.
But do you think that maybe Israel won't push it any further after this? Do you think they?
No, I think that Netanyahu was ready to immediately proceed with it, but I presume the security apparatus, the intelligence services, the army, who would have had to deal with the consequences, persuaded him to wait. And perhaps also America. Or they would have already done it.
Yeah.
Yes, Maher.
I would like to trace the beginnings of this deal by going back to 1917, Balfour Declaration, and just a few years following that. Haim Wadsman, who was instrumental in the Balfour Declaration, used to say in public meetings that we will go to Palestine and live in peace with the Palestinian people. But in private, closed meetings with fellow Jews in this country, he used to say, we'll make Palestine as Jewish as England is English. In other words, from the beginning, the Zionist movement didn't want just a national home for the Jews in Palestine. They wanted a state on the whole of Palestine. If you trace it back a bit further in history, the prophet, if you like, of the Zionism, Theodor Herzl, said in his secret diaries, we will go to Palestine, and before we kick out the indigenous people of Palestine, we will make them remove the thorns and break the rocks in order to prepare the land for us. So from the word go, the Zionist movement wanted the whole of Palestine, and they wanted the land, but without its indigenous people, the Palestinians. Now, in this so-called deal of the century, the real author of this deal, really, is Netanyahu. Jared Kushner might have put a touch here, touch there. But the fact is that this plan was like a wish list drawn up by Netanyahu. What Trump did was cut and paste, put it on White House official paper, and declare it to the world as his deal of the century. And that's about it, really. It's a plan which forces any sensible, free-thinking person who believes in justice to say no to it immediately, without hesitation. It's a plan that is designed to force the Palestinians to reject it.
Dr. Ghada, on the subject of returning to first principles, Israel is no more, no less than a European colonial enterprise, just like white South Africa, white Rhodesia, any other part of the Commonwealth. It was intended to be established anywhere that the British Empire would give them. We might have had a different PLO, the Patagonian Liberation Organization, if they had succeeded in making it in Argentina. We might have had a Ugandan or a Seychelles liberation. They were ready to establish their state anywhere that the empire would afford them. And the Wiseman quote that Maher gave could be twinned with another, that we will make in the Middle East a little loyal Ulster. In other words, the Northern Ireland, that they would effectively be an outpost of white European colonialism. So that's the first principle. The second principle is that in order to run such a state on someone else's land, when you haven't killed or driven out all their people, you must apply apartheid. I can't give you a vote like I've got a vote, because you'll vote me out. I can't give you the rights that I have because you'll use them to weaken my colonial project. So it is a colonial enterprise which runs an apartheid system and can only do so. That's what we have to return to calling it, isn't it? And the main problem with Oslo was that we gave up that. We said they had a right to be there, but they could only have 78% of it. It's time now to talk, surely, as you have been doing, about one Palestinian Israel state where Jews and Muslims and Christians live as equal citizens with none being superior to the other.
Absolutely. And of course, you're right that the heart of this problem is the way it's been seen and the way people have dealt with it. They have not understood, as you've made so clear just now, that this is a settler colonial state, quite classic in many, many ways. And as a settler colonial state, precisely implementing its superior rights to those of the native population, we have got Israel today. Now, what I really want I'm so glad we've got to this point, because, you see, I feel we have to, first of all, understand we're here, okay? So no amount of thinking if this had happened, if we'd done that, if whatever happened, we're here. And what is here? Here is a geographical and demographic reality which has got to focus people's minds. Israel today is one state. There is no Palestine, as we know. There is the area between the river and the sea is one area ruled by one ruler, Israel. What's that if it's not a one state? That's a one state. But the problem is it is an apartheid state. And the problem is that roughly half its population has citizenship and rights, and roughly half of its population has no citizenship and no rights. It is extraordinary to me that Israel was able to get away with this, ruling these people with giving them no rights whatsoever for as long as it has. Now, it's time for the Palestinians themselves, actually, to take matters into their own hands. I think the time has come to stop talking about if this, if that, if we could unify, if the Arabs could unify. There is no substitute for the Palestinians taking their destiny into their own hands, which they did once before when they created the PLO. That was a great achievement, and it was evidence of, it was an illustration of what happens when a people says, we are going to act, we are going to do things. We're not waiting for somebody to give us permission. Now, in my view, the time has come again for the people to do precisely that, to say, we are now going to act. And the people who will lead this movement are the people on the ground. There is no escape. I, as an exile, my friends here, we can all have views, we will help, we will support, but the role in this, at this juncture, is for the people on the ground. They have to say, we will not be ruled unequally as people without rights by Israel, not a moment longer. We demand that if Israel wishes to go on ruling us, it must give us equal rights with the other people it rules. Now, to my mind, when I've talked about this on previous occasions, it's really evoked a lot of opposition, a lot of criticism, and so on. And yet, to me, it seems absolutely self-evident. If you're being ruled alongside other people, but you don't have the same rights, what do you do first? You don't go around going to the UN again and asking for another resolution. You demand of the ruler, you tell the ruler, we are not going to do this anymore. We want equal rights. And if you don't like it, get out of our territory. Now, Israel's never going to get out of the territory. Therefore, the Palestinians themselves have to take this into their own hands, and they have to start a campaign, a proper, well-worked-out, intelligent campaign that is aimed at world opinion and internally to say, we will not last a minute longer like this. We want equal rights.
Well, look, Doctor, Sinn Féin, the Irish Republican Party, has won the election in the Irish Republic and has long been in dual power in the British part of Ireland. That began in my lifetime, and therefore yours, with a demand for civil rights. In fact, in the old-fashioned parlance, one man, one vote. They forgot about the women. One man, one woman, one vote. Equal rights. In 1968, that began as the movement in the north of Ireland, and now it is hegemonic in the island of Ireland. Now, you've been a pioneer of this thinking, and I have not. But I think that you are right, that the focus now should be, all right, you've taken our country, and because things are as they are in the region and the world, we can't actually do anything about that. But we are not going to accept being ruled by you without the same rights as the other people that are ruled by you. There are 6 million of us, and there are 6 million of you. So we have to have one man, one woman, one vote, one law that applies to everyone. Because I've got to say to our young friend in the middle, it's waiting for Godot to wait for the Arabs. It's waiting for Godot to wait for the United Nations. No one is going to come to your aid. It's time to do it yourself with an entirely new political leadership. That's the one thing you didn't say. I'm not going to embarrass you by inviting you to say, but the old men and the old methods and the old demands haven't worked and are not going to work. Don't you think?
No, absolutely. Now, of course, we have real logistical problems with this solution, which, of course, in principle is unexceptionable, really. But we have problems because there is a leadership in place, and the leadership, the Palestinian Authority, is what it is. It's not fit for purpose. It is not capable of taking on of changing in such a way that it can take on this role. That's why the grassroots movement has to be a grassroots movement in every sense of that word. We have South Africa for the most wonderful example of how when an oppressed people decides that it will not live oppressed, unequal, discriminated against, it will not accept that. And look what happened. When one talks about this, of course, the next question, which is implicit in what you said, is, well, how are you going to do it? Of course. But, you know, for me...
Wouldn't be any worse off.
No. And for me, it's enough if this idea can take on that people start more and more to support it. And the more support you get for an idea in principle, the more probable it is that it will be implemented.
Yousef, final word to you.
Despite the fact that the Palestinian leadership, led by President Abbas, say clearly that the so-called two-state solution is dead, they are not willing to dissolve the Palestinian Authority because simply they say we don't want to give legitimacy to the Israeli occupation. But in order to for the people to take the matter into their hands, they need the boost to their morale, spiritual morale, and this doesn't exist anymore with the so-called normalization ties between the Arab regimes and Israel. So I think the state that we live in, the state of despair, frustration, people on the ground are frustrated, and without the support, the real support from the leadership, the Palestinian leadership to the people say, why would we sacrifice ourselves and go get shot like sitting ducks on the frontier of Gaza or the West Bank, whereas our leadership doesn't care about us. Our leadership continues the collaboration with the Israeli side. They are not taking serious measures on the ground to show that they care about us. So it has to come from within, I agree. And we don't pin our hopes anymore on the so-called Arab regimes anymore, because it seems every country has its own problems, and we have an Arab proverb says, no one will help you unless you help yourself. So we have to have faith again in ourselves. We have a just cause, and despite the fact people are lost hope, as I mentioned before, but I hope Palestinians will see a light at the end of this dark tunnel.
Well, I hope so too. Ironically, in the 1970s, even a part of the 1980s, the Palestinians were the most democratic, the most militant, the most politically plural of all the Arab populations. In Beirut, in Lebanon, where I used to go and visit Arafat in the 1970s, every building was a party. Every party had a paper and a magazine and posters, and there was a constant flux of argument and ideas and contest for direction and leadership. And most of that seems to have disappeared. And now, instead, we have President Mahmoud Abbas. God bless him and long life to him, but his period of directing events, for me, has long expired. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. Thank you very much indeed for being here and for watching. I've been George Galloway. This has been Kalima Horra.